Tropical Freeze might be one of, if not the best 2D platformers to ever be released by Nintendo, and despite the game doubling its sales when it was ported over to the Nintendo Switch from the Wii U, its near 5 million sales is nowhere near the caliber of all these other games. So today I'm going to be covering why this game is Nintendo's hidden gem and how this game was truly ahead of its time when it came to 2D platforming. Despite this game being ported to the Switch in 2018 with upscaled graphics and of course the addition of Funky Kong, which I'll get to in a bit, we need to remember that this game came out in early 2014 for the Wii U. Right off the bat, we of course have the opening cutscene, which is very cinematic looking, followed by you of course being flung away into this broken plane in the middle of the forest, where your journey to beat Lord Frederick begins. And yes, his name really is Lord Frederick. From the get-go, it's very clear that this game not only looks and plays smoothly, but it has its own unique art style as well as an atmosphere in each of the worlds. Of course, we got the first world, Lost Mangroves, which is your typical jungle that is, of course, if a typical jungle has a badass minecart levels, cool underwater sections, this beautiful level, and a fucking seal. Then we got World 2, which is just the epitome of what fall is, and I'm definitely biased because fall is my favorite season. I really like the progression of this world's atmosphere as we go from having the inclusion of these sawmills to this cabin area in the mountain, which includes this level that has cheese and rodents, all the way to the top of the mountain where we are met with cool zipline challenges and of course the owl himself. In contrast to the glorious mountain, when you enter World 3, you are met with this torn apart savanna. We got giraffes, which by the way, this level has an amazing OST, but we'll get to the music in a little bit. We also got tornadoes comboed with rhinos, bramble infested areas, these monkeys, and what possibly might be one of my favorite levels, which is none other than Scorch and Torch. Moving on to World 4, we see the true potential of the underwater atmosphere we had only been briefly introduced to in the previous 3 worlds. Even non-underwater levels such as 4, 5 have nice waterfalls in the background, alongside trees, the ocean, and even enemies who are controlling the obstacles. This leads us to Juicy Jungle, which is definitely my favorite world, as I just love the idea of there being this flourishing forest full of fruit. As you go down the jungle, it gets colder and colder, which is not only foreshadowing for the 6th world, but overall just a very cool concept when coupled with fruit, as we go from this fruit-filled forest to a fruit factory. Seeing the world progressively get colder alongside the fruit is just such a cool idea, and also I like the color purple. This finally brings us to the final world, unless you count these secret levels as the final world, but I personally see this as a side area as opposed to a full-on world. Regardless, this massive ice mountain, which was once a resident DK mountain, just makes so much sense when it comes to having a closing world for Tropical Freeze. You start off at the bottom of this mountain, fighting your way through the Tropical Freeze, if you will, but when you get to the top, the Tropical Freeze becomes some tropical heat as you're surrounded by lava everywhere. While we're on the topic of atmosphere, I might as well talk about the Easter eggs in this game, as each world is filled with them. I mean, in the first level, if you go backwards instead of forward, you can go inside the broken plane and you will see Donkey Kong Country Returns on the TVs. However, this would not be the only reference to Returns, as this game is littered with them. I mean, if you played Returns, you might notice how World 6 looks kind of similar to World 1 in Returns, and that's because it is. Besides that, there are just a bunch of small Easter eggs, such as this tune from Cranky Kong, or if Donkey Kong is idle, he pulls out his Nintendo Switch! These Easter eggs exemplify attention to detail and truly show a lot of character. Oh yeah, speaking of the characters, we got 5 of them in this game. Of course there's Donkey Kong, who doesn't have any special abilities on his own, but of course this changes when he is coupled with Diddy, Dixie, or Cranky. Starting with Diddy, you are given a jetpack that allows you to hover in the air for a brief moment, and if you press down A while in the water, you will be able to travel faster. Then we got Dixie Kong, who might honestly be the best out of the 3, as you're able to not only get this sort of double jump given her hair helicopter ability, but you are able to swim through harsh conditions, which is sometimes what you need to get to secret areas or even secret levels. Finally, we got Cranky Kong, who ironically enough is able to use his cane to help Donkey Kong bounce on spiky surfaces, gain height, or even attack enemies underwater. I should also mention that there is something that you can do with each character called the Kong Pow, which is an ability that it activates when you get 100 bananas, and using it will get rid of all of the enemies on the screen. When you use it with Diddy, you get balloons. When you use it with Dixie, you get golden hearts, and when you use it with Cranky, you get that money, baby. Then of course we got Funky Kong, who is a standalone character that serves as an easier way of playing the game considering his abilities and extra health. His abilities include being able to roll indefinitely without using a buddy Kong, a surfboard so that he can not only stand on spikes safely but somehow use it as a fucking helicopter to slow himself down from falling, and an unfathomable amount of swag. These characters add a lot of exigence to the game, and I think having Funky Kong as a new option was a good move by Nintendo when porting the game to the Switch, as Tropical Freeze is not an easy platformer by any means. Now I've already briefly covered some of the levels within Tropical Freeze, but I think it's time we take a deep dive into what makes them so great. One thing that makes the levels so good are the collectibles that you can get inside of them. These collectibles being the Kong letters, which if you collect all of the Kong letters in a world, you unlock a temple level, and puzzle pieces, which if you get all the puzzle pieces in a world, you unlock a special K level. These levels are typically the hardest ones you'll encounter in each world, as they have no checkpoints. You also get cool art when you collect all of the puzzle pieces in a level, which is a nice little touch. Having these collectibles scattered throughout the level not only incentivizes the player to unlock new challenges, but it encourages you to explore every nook and cranny of the level, as more often than not, there will be a secret lying ahead. You actually see this exploration to be encouraged from the very start of the game, as you are rewarded for checking behind you when you first enter a level or going past a barrel that would otherwise end the level. Furthermore, these collectibles are a very strong metric of game progression because they truly test the player's skills in ways that wouldn't normally be tested by just casually breezing through the levels. Unlocking the Kong letters gives you secret levels, but these secret levels aren't as hard as the levels you get from getting all the puzzles, as getting the puzzle pieces are a bit more difficult than getting the Kong letters since there are more of them, as well as the fact that they are typically in more obscure spots than the letters. In fact, collectibles lead me to my next point about the levels, which is replayability. The replayability of the levels in this game is, in my opinion, completely unmatched to most 2D platformers to this day. Not only do the vast amount of collectibles alongside the rewards for collecting them create for a lot of replayability, but the characters, secret exits, and even the time trials all create for robust replayability. Similar to 2D Mario games, you will be presented with the option for a secret exit, and this secret exit will generally take you down a different level path than what is the standard one. Sometimes this concept of the secret exit will be taken to the next level when you have to use a certain character to get to the desired secret exit, such as Dixie Kong to swim through this water, or Cranky Kong to climb up into this area. Above all, the time trials, in my opinion, create for the most replayability. There are medals for each level, and it's always fun to push your abilities to get a gold medal. Alongside that, there's a global leaderboard, so if you have an easy time getting the gold medal and want to do more time trials, then you can compete for a spot on this global leaderboard. It's always a treat to see the top times on these leaderboards, as they are nothing short of insane. I mean, hell, when I got Tropical Freeze on the Switch in 2018, I was able to get a world record on 1K that's still up on my YouTube channel. I mean, just look at all this crazy bouncing shit I had to do just to beat the world record by 0.1 seconds. Okay, I may be 11th place now, but we don't talk about that. To top it all off, the music in each of these levels is absolutely phenomenal. Each track is not only unique, but they fit the vibe of each level really well, whether it be this melodic music that plays in Grassland Grove, this calm yet upbeat soundtrack that plays while you're in this minecart, or this insanely intense music that plays when fighting the final boss. The inclusion of all of these instruments, whether it be the badass guitar riffs, the drums, flute, the vocals, or even the yeah, just adds so much to the levels. Even Donkey Kong and Friends play a tune that segues into the credits. As someone who doesn't really pay that much attention to music when playing these types of games, hearing the OST in each level was always exciting to me, and it really helps to make the player feel super immersed in the world that they are in. Now, we've talked about the levels, characters, music, collectibles, and more, but one thing I haven't talked about is the enemies or the bosses. Like I said earlier, the enemies will sometimes play very clever roles in the levels, whether they are controlling a part of the level or they are just in the middle of the level doing nothing, ultimately waiting to get bounced on, or better yet, ran the fuck over by the rhino. Now, I personally don't think the enemies are too extraordinary. I mean, they are enemies after all. It's not like I look at a Goomba and absolutely adore it, but the enemies fit very well within their respective environments and add a lot to the atmosphere. However, I'm only saying this because the bosses in this game truly take the enemies to the next level and exceed any expectations I would otherwise have for bosses in a 2D platformer. I just gotta say, they all have super goofy names and it's amazing. We got Pompey the Presumptuous, Scowl the Startling, Baboom the Boisterous, Fugu the Frightening, Bashmaster the Unbreakable, and of course, Lord fucking Frederick the Snowmad King. Starting off with the first boss, it's a rather simple fight where Pompey will throw enemies at you and then slide in the arena, giving you a chance to jump on him. One thing that you'll notice when fighting these bosses is that depending on how well you perform, you can actually eliminate phases of the fight that happen later on, which I personally think is a very neat touch. Moving on to World 2, we got Scowl, which is a very fitting fight considering that we are at the top of a mountain that has an owl formation at the top. In the first phase of Scowl's fight, he will use his little owls to try to damage you, but in turn, you use these same owls to actually do damage to Scowl. This concept is expanded upon in the later phases when you have to not only bounce on owls to hit Scowl, but in the wind and dodge the feathers he drops on you using these cannons. Ultimately, the culmination of the little owls is what led to the downfall of the big owl. As we make our way to the savannah, we are met with these 3 monkeys who all work together to make your life miserable, whether it be jumping around, swinging around, throwing bombs at you, or even making clones of themselves so that they can damage you. These monkeys are quite the treat to say the least. Then of course we got Fugu in World 4, who is this massive spiky fish that will use its enormous size and sucking powers to kill you. For some reason, the only spot that you're able to hit Fugi in is in the butt. Anyways, moving on to World 5, we are beat with Bashmaster the Bear, who is a slow titan that yields a big weapon. Not only will he try to bash you with this weapon, but he will use it to try to push you off the arena with ice blocks. And finally, we got Lord Frederick, who will use his horn to shoot enemies at you, and when he gets bored of using his horn, well, he will just come straight for you. The bosses are just super unique, and I'm glad that they are long drawn out fights that progressively get harder, as opposed to, you know, the boss fights in every single 2D Mario platformer. Now, of course, every game has flaws, but if I'm going to be honest, I don't see any major faults with this game. The biggest fault that I personally think of is the checkpoints, because sometimes there might be placed a bit too early, especially in later worlds, but even then that doesn't bother me, as I'm personally sick and tired of super easy 2D platformers becoming the new standard for Nintendo. Regardless, if Tropical Freeze has all of these amazing features alongside a very high rating among those who have played it, then what makes this game so underrated and underappreciated? Well, for starters, a lot of people didn't pay too much attention to Tropical Freeze when it was first announced for the Wii U, as people wanted a new Metroid game instead. Then, when it came to releasing Tropical Freeze on the Switch, I think people once again didn't pay much attention to it because the game was sold at full price, when in reality it should have been like at least half the price. I've had multiple people tell me that they were actually interested in buying the game, but then saw the price and made the decision to not buy it, which is a completely valid reason, because Nintendo should not be getting away with selling games that are years old for full price, even if there may be upscaled graphics or even some new features. Some games just don't get the recognition that they deserve, and I personally think Tropical Freeze is just another one of those games. From the levels, enemies, bosses, characters, OST, replayability, music, and aesthetic, Tropical Freeze is truly a hidden gem among Nintendo 2D platformers, and it would be an understatement to say that this game is good. And on that note, if you haven't played this game yet, and what the hell are you doing?